we go.
Welcome to the live stream. This is Big Reptile Talk. I'm Big Derek, and we got Big Rob in the building, man. How you doing today, brother?
What's good, man? I'm doing good. Having a good day. How you doing?
I can't complain, man. I can't complain. Before we start, we got to work on the beginning of my show, and I'll tell you what I mean. I used to say, this is Big Reptile Talk. Welcome to the podcast. But I don't know the definition of a podcast. Isn't a podcast like on a radio?
Podcast is usually, I think, just audio, but I think you can stream podcasts too. I think like the video portion, it could be considered like a live stream for people who are watching it currently, and then I don't know, I don't know if it's posted afterwards, like a video stream or whatever. But audio would definitely be a podcast.
Okay. I was like, hey, this is Big Reptile Talk. Welcome to the podcast. And I was like, nah, I was like, you know what? This is Big Reptile Talk. Welcome to the show. I had to change it up, man.
There we go.
But anyways, we got Rob in the building. We're gonna talk to you, get to know you a little bit, man. I'm a big fan of Nerd, all you guys. Let's first talk about your job title. If I'm correct, you're the marketer, right? Or what's your job title?
Yeah, my job here is like always ever changing. I've done like just about everything when it comes to, this place. When I first started here, I worked just like in the pet store, and I did a little bit of monitor care. And then I did a little bit of stuff with the big snakes. I worked with ball pythons. I've done exclusively just monitor stuff. I've done some breeding coordination. I do some sales and marketing. Currently, most of my job right now, I take care of the young reticulated pythons. I'm working on all the shipping. So anything that gets shipped out of Nerd generally gets shipped out by me. I work a little bit of the sales stuff. I talk to some customers. I do a lot of the social media stuff. So stuff that gets posted on Facebook and Instagram is usually by me, with the help from a couple other people as well. But primarily it's usually me doing a lot of that stuff. I do educational programs. So I do, we have private tours here. So most of the people who come for private tours, if they're not specifically scheduled with Kevin, they usually end up coming with me. I work with some of the filming for YouTube, and then I'm on our venomous permit, so I do a little bit of work with the venomous snakes too.
That's what's up, man.
Hell yeah.
You got my dream job. Like, you working with animals all day. I'm jealous. So the next question was, I was going to ask you to break down your day at work, but you already did it, man. You all over the place doing everything.
Yeah. Usually first thing in the morning, I come in and I'll do a little bit of work with the juvenile reticulated python. So feeding, cleaning, changing waters, checking on our babies, making sure that they're doing okay. And then it's usually quickly during the week, it's straight into shipping stuff. So we're shipping anywhere from 10 to 40 animals every shipping day. Right now with COVID and everything, it's been real weird. We're only shipping from our location to the nearest FedEx hub to the customer. We're only shipping on like Tuesdays and Wednesdays. For a while, we're doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now it's cut down to basically just Tuesdays and Wednesdays, priority overnight. So we ship out on Tuesday, you get it on Wednesday, or Wednesday we ship out and you get it on Thursday. Just FedEx has really gone through some crazy changes with COVID and the amount of volume that they're experiencing, and just to be safe for the animals, we've had to change the way that we ship things a lot.
Okay, I see what's going on now. With you working at Nerd, man, y'all have so many animals. You got to tell me what's your favorite animal to work with?
Favorite animals that Nerd has, or like my favorite animals in general?
We're going to talk about your collection in a little bit, so I want to know the favorite animal at Nerd.
I really like working with our rhinoceros vipers. I'm just like so geeked out by those things, man. They are just, I don't even know. Like, it's hard to describe because like they're so unique. They've got this heavily keeled scales, and they got these bright colors, and they got the horns on the front of the face. And in New England, there's very few places where you can actually even see venomous snakes. It's very heavily regulated up here in the Northeast. So we're the only place in the state of New Hampshire that has a permit for venomous snakes. There's only 3 people on our permit. It's me, Kevin, and Timmy. Like, they're the only people who are permitted to work with our venomous stuff. So it's a huge privilege to be able to do that. And then rhino vipers have always been one of my favorite snakes since I was a real little kid. Like back when I was, 14 or 15, when I made my first email address, it was Bitis nasicornis, the Latin name for rhino vipers, Bitis_nasicornis at yahoo.com. And I still use that email address. And just being able to work with those, I love those. They're so cool.
Okay. Maybe one day I'll get to work with one. Now, I got to ask this, man. When you at work, is there an animal that they like, hey, I need you to go pick that up? And you like, hell no. So like, is there an animal you won't touch?
Not that I won't touch. I've worked with everything, and if people have something that is a little bit rowdy or somebody needs backup on something, I'm usually the person that they call. I've got such a diverse background in things that I work with. I've worked with everything that we've got at Nerd, so there's not any animal here that I'm like afraid to work with. I personally, like just on my own personal, the way that I feel, I don't like working with crocodile monitors that much. I'll do it if I have to, but when people are like, "Hey, we got to work with the crocodile monitors," I'm usually like, "I'll find somebody else to do it." I don't. The risk reward is not worth it for me. They're really pretty animals, but they've got this like crazy teeth on them. They're really high strung, and for me, it's just not worth it. They can be so sketchy. A lot more. Everything else is more easy for me to work with than the crocodile monitors.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't want to mess with no crocodile monitor. Now let's talk about Lilith, man. That's one of my favorite animals y'all got. Just the white. What is it? I want to white cobra. What's the word? Leucistic. I think that's
leucistic.
The word for it.
Yeah. Blue eye. Well, it's technically pronounced leucistic, but everyone says leucistic, so I always go with leucistic. So blue-eyed leucistic king cobra. She's the only one in the United States that we know of. There's, I think, 2 or 3 more overseas, but none of them have come over stateside. When we purchased her, we only knew of one more that existed. As of last year or this past like 6 months, 1 or 2 babies have been born. So there's, I guess, 3 or 4 of them now total that we know of. And she is a beast. She's a monster, man. She is something else.
Now, like what's going through your mind when you're handling her? Just like you're like, oh, I got a cold. What are your thoughts when you're handling her?
So I personally haven't worked her by myself. I usually am their backup when it's either Kevin or our guy Timmy working with her. Personally, king cobras are not really like my favorite venomous snakes, so I haven't really been pushy to like want to work with her by myself. She is really high strung. She definitely will test your limits. King cobras are super smart, so when you are working with them, they will bluff strike where they'll push up to see how far you'll go, and if you'll back up when they come up to you, and they're super smart. And I've seen her push our venomous guys like right to the limits to see how far they'll go, what they'll do when they're working with her. And so I usually am standing as like a backup. I try and be more hands off. So it's a lot safer when you're working with a king cobra to kind of let the person who's working them do as much as they can. And then if you need to, you step in at the last second to kind of pull her back, rein her back in. And, we've had some like close calls where she's gotten, uncomfortably close to people, and I'll step right in and hook her back. And, just watching other people work with her, she's a breeder of her own. Like I've seen people with king cobras who are like, well, I've got a tough king cobra, and she doesn't act like any of their king cobras. She is straight on, like on point, push you right to your limits. She's right about it.
Okay. Now, talk to me about your personal collection. I know your collection is insane, man. What you got at the house, man?
So I mostly work with Borneo short-tail pythons and scrub pythons. Those are my 2 like favorite species of non-venomous snakes. So those are mostly what my collection is built around. And scrub pythons have been my favorite for a really long time. I really couldn't get an appreciation for what it was like to keep them until I got my own. And, before I kept them, I thought that they were cool. I thought they were pretty, and I knew that they were smart. But I look at big snakes kind of different than most people. Like a lot of people, when they look at like reticulated pythons or scrubs or berms or anacondas or something like that, they're like, oh, it's a challenge. I'm just going to, dive right into it and get my feet wet. And I kind of approached it really differently. I did not buy scrub pythons when I first got into snakes because I have like this huge amount of respect for these animals, and not saying that like other people don't respect them, but when I thought about like scrub pythons and retics and a lot of the other bigger snakes, I was like, when I get to the point in my reptile keeping career that I get them, I don't ever want to have to get rid of them because I'm in a living situation where I'll have to get rid of them for some stupid, benign reason. When I get them, I want to be able to keep them their whole lives. I did a lot of research before I got my first scrub pythons. I got offered scrub pythons for like to buy a lot, like for years and years and years before I actually bought one, probably 7 years before I ever kept scrub pythons. I saw them for sale, and not really expensive. They used to be like a $200, $300 snake. So it was never like I can't afford to buy it. It was more like I don't want to buy this thing and like really fall in love with it and then have to get rid of it for some reason. And so I really waited to get into the scrub pythons, and I think that it really paid off for me because I have this like huge appreciation for them, and I just really love them. And then the Borneos, I've loved those things since I was like a little kid. Like I used to see pictures of blood pythons and short tails in books, and I was like, man, they're just so cool. They feel like a big snake, but you don't need a 10-foot long enclosure. Like, nothing against people who keep reticulated pythons, but if I've got a super dwarf, I've got one reticulated python, a super dwarf tiger, anerythristic from Sangre to Serpents. And, most people, I think that they don't really take into consideration really how big these snakes get and how much space they really need. And so I was never really big into like, I didn't really want to get reticulated pythons. And I totally just like lost my train of thought on that. I don't know. The retics I just was never super into, but the bloods and the short tails, they feel like you've got a big snake, but you don't need a 10-foot long enclosure because they only get like 4.5 foot long, 5 foot
Right.
long. So you can like, ethically keep one in a 5 foot or 4 foot enclosure without them, looking like they're cramped or anything like that. So the bloods and short tails always had a huge draw for me, even when I was like really little. Like before I got my first snake, I was like, I want to get a blood python. I want to get a short tail python. And back then, nobody was really breeding them besides like the Barkers and maybe Kevin, and very select people had ever produced blood pythons 25 years ago when I was growing up. So I didn't really think about it as a thing that was possible. And then as I got more involved in snakes, I've been keeping snakes now for 18 years, almost 19 years. And I still have my first snake is a ball python. He's like 19 years old now. He lives with my mom because when I moved out, I brought all my snakes and she was like, oh, I don't have any reptiles at home. You got to leave me with something. So she stays, or Monty, my first ball python, he stays with her, and now he gets to hang out with my nephew. So my nephew gets hands-on experience with snakes now, which is really cool because they live like an hour away from me. So we don't always get to hang out. But he gets to hang out with my first snake, so it's like passing down to the next generation,
For sure. Now, I know you really drawn to the pythons. Do you have any venomous in your collection?
No. So New Hampshire and New England, there's no private ownership of venomous snakes. NERD is the only place in the state of New Hampshire that has a permit for venomous snakes. Massachusetts, I think there's only 2 places that have permits for venomous snakes. It's like Rainforest Reptiles, Mike Robalski, and then the Museum of Science in Boston has a permit for like rattlesnakes and copperheads, just so that they can have them on display to teach people about them. But there's no private ownership of venomous snakes anywhere in New England. They really frown upon it. They make it real difficult for you if you wanted to get a permit for it. In New Hampshire, no one's been able to get a permit. Of all the people that have applied, they've never been able to get permits for them. And I'm not much of a rule breaker, honestly. When I was growing up, I was very, my parents wanted me to really be by the book. Don't risk it if you're not worth the, don't take the chance if you're not willing to pay that risk that you're taking. And in New England, if you get caught with venomous snakes, they'll take all your snakes. And so for me, it was never worth it to risk my own collection of animals that I've been building up over the years and spending time and money selectively putting together. It was never worth it to risk that sort of thing. And so I've never kept my own personal snakes. I've gone to other people's collections, worked with other people's venomous snakes. I have gone into the wild and found wild venomous snakes and worked with those. But personally, I've never kept venomous snakes. I just work with them at the facility. And then, as I go to other people's collections, I work with them at other people's collections.
Nice. They find out you got a rattlesnake at your house, boy, you're going to prison. You're going to prison.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it would be real bad. I used to live in Maine, and somebody had Burmese python illegally because they don't have permits for that in Maine. And they found out they had a Burmese python, and they confiscated and euthanized their Burmese python. They killed their Hog Island boa, which is perfectly legal to own, and they killed a Trans-Pecos rat snake because they didn't know what it was, so they thought it was illegal to own. And so they confiscated all those animals, fined them like $1,000 or $2,000 or something. And so, it just was never worth it to me to risk my own collection and on the ignorance of Fish and Game and those officers, their wildlife officers. It was never worth it to me to do that. So I was like, not worth it. I got my chance to work with venomous stuff here at Nerd. I trained under, a couple different people who were permitted at the time and got hands-on experience with cobras and vipers and stuff like that. And then through other friends in their facilities as well. So, I've got a decent amount of experience. I spent a lot of time talking to people who kept venomous snakes. Even when I was like 15 and 16, like I would go on chat rooms, and anyone who's got venomous snakes, I would ask them, what protocol they use, how they hook things, what they use for reference, and learning from people who have already done it before, and just learning and watching, because, life will try and teach you by experience, but honestly, the better thing that you can do is learn from other people's mistakes, because you don't want to make every mistake by yourself. You don't want to, learn from every mistake that everyone else has done. If you can learn from other people's mistakes, it'll put you a step ahead, when you're, especially with venomous snakes, if you make a mistake, it could be your life on the line. So.
Right. I agree. Now let's talk about Nerd, man. Like I said, I'm a big fan of all you guys. And I ask everybody that comes on my show this question. I actually had Miguel from Always Evolving Pythons on, and I asked him. I said, "Give me a crazy fan story, because y'all are big. Y'all are big." Mm-hmm. So he told me about a story. He was at a reptile show, and there was a guy that came up to him. He was like, "Hey, after the show, let's go get some drinks." And Miguel was like, "I drink beer. Let's go throw some back." So they went threw the drinks back, and afterwards, the guy was like, we had drinks. Let's go ahead and go up to the room. And Miguel was like, whoa. Wait a second, brother. So I always, and I hope he doesn't kill me for telling that story, but I always ask people, y'all are big. And so give me a crazy fan story. Has any of the women ran in there? Was like, that's Rob. They threw like 10 panties at you.
No. To be perfectly honest, it's never the women that really hit on me. I get a lot of dudes that slide into my DM that are like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, hold on. No, I'm not." I just want to pause right there. Like, I appreciate you. I thank you for the attention, but it's not my jam. Trying to think. I don't really have any like crazy fan stories. Like, I'm just a regular reptile dude. Like, I don't really think about myself as being any different than any other reptile person, honestly. Like, I put my left shoe on, my right shoe on after I put my pants on. So, except for that one time where I put my shoes on first and then went to put my pants on. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I don't even know what the hell I'm doing. What am I doing? Right. I think the craziest like fan story was, at the beginning of COVID, we used to do live streams, like, I think it was twice a week or something like that. And there was a couple people in there who were like, "Hey, Rob's cool. Like, anything that you got that's related to Rob, I'll take it." There was like one fan that we had that was like super into me. And so, in one of the giveaways, we used to give away merch and shirts and like wristbands and stuff. One of the people had won like everything that we could possibly send them. And so they were like, "Hey, is it cool? Like, you should grab one of Rob's shirts and send it to me." And I was like, "You know what? If you win the next one, sure, we'll do that." And they won the next one, and it's in our intro on our YouTube channel. But I'm working with one of the snakes, and Donnie comes in and is like, "Hey, I came to grab that shirt for the person who won the contest." And he grabs my shirt and just like rips it right off of me. And I'm like, dude, I'm standing in here with no shirt on with a big reticulated python out. What are you doing right now? And he's like running down the hallway. He's like, I got Rob's shirt. And he's filming it the whole time. I was like, really? We're going to do that now? That's how it's going to go down? Okay, I see how it is. I see how it is.
Man, hey, if Kevin watched this, he needs a raise, man. He didn't took his shirt off and sent it to a fan. This,
right off my back.
this brother needs a raise. Now, being there, now it's you're probably gonna say the crocodile monitor, but what's the worst bite you ever took while you were working at Nerd?
Honestly, you can ask any of the employees that work with me. I very rarely get bit. Like literally. So here's the deal. When a lot of the newer guys start working here, a lot of times they'll want to put them with me so I can teach them how I work with animals and all this stuff. And my rule number one that I tell every single person that works at Nerd, rule number one before anything else, don't get bit. Every day when I get new people who come in here and they just get hired and they're training and stuff, every day I make a point of stopping in and say, hey, rule number one, don't get bit. Rule number one, don't get bit. I say it to them all day, every day. And, it's not to say, hey, mishandle the animals or anything like that. It's not like that. Don't grab them by the head. Don't, be over the top. But rule number one is don't get bit. Be careful whenever you're working with the animals. Have confidence. And that's one of the things that I try and instill in all the people here is be confident when you're working with the animals. Because me and Kevin, you can ask the guys that work with us how often they see us get bit. Hardly ever. Hardly ever do I ever get bit. My worst bite was from a Boelen's python, and it was like a 7.5 foot long Boelen's python. It was not even when I worked at Nerd. It was when I was working at a different facility. It was a shop called HB Exotics. It was half tattoo shop, half reptile shop, owned by the same guy, Jason Chapman, up in Maine. And he had a tattoo client who was like, oh, I'm kind of into snakes, show me around. So after he's done getting tattooed, he comes over. I'm showing him some snakes. He's looking at ball pythons and blood pythons and all this and that and the other thing. And he's like, okay, so what's the rarest snake you got? What's the most expensive thing you got? And we had been raising up some Boelen's pythons. And I'm like, hey, we got these Boelen's pythons. They are, really rare. Hardly anyone's ever bred them before. We're working with them and raising them up, trying to get them ready to breed. And he's like, oh, can I see them? And so they're in these tubs that are almost 4 foot wide by 3 foot deep and maybe 18 inches tall, these really big tubs. And usually 90% of the time they'll sit right at the front of the tub because it's kind of away from the heat and it's area where when we're feeding them, they'll be right there. So my usual thing when working with them is I would pop it open just a little bit, just enough to see inside. Take a look inside, see if they're at the front. They're not at the front, cool, I can open it up. If they are at the front, I can use a hook and push them back.
Right.
So I open the tub up a little bit. I see the tail of the snake, but the body is going to the back of the tub. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm expecting it to be behind the hiding box because there's a big hiding box and a big water dish in the middle of the tub. I pull the tub most of the way open. It's sitting on top of the hiding box, and it sees the heat signature from my forearm and launches out of this tub. Boom, hits me right on my forearm. Top part of its jaws right here, bottom part of its jaws right there, and it starts wrapping up my arm. And the dude who I'm with doesn't know anything about snakes, so he's losing his mind. Holy crap, we gotta call 911. And I'm like, put your phone away. Don't you dare call 911 right now. It's got the middle of my forearm. It's wrapping up my arm. And it's 7 foot long, so it starts to get up towards my shoulder, and the tail is starting to come up towards my neck. So I just, intercept the tail, push it down this way. Its tail wraps around my arm down to my wrist. So it's wrapped from my wrist all the way up to my shoulder, and then it's biting me right here. And the guy's losing his mind. He's panicking, full-blown panicking. And I'm like, dude, it's in the middle of my arm. It can't swallow me from here. It's not around my neck. We're okay. It's fine. And it only wrapped me for maybe 20, 30 seconds. But it was enough time for this guy to be like, holy crap, I got to get out of here. And he took off to the tattoo shop side of the thing. And so I'm sitting there. It lets go after a second. I hold it for another couple seconds, put it back into the enclosure. It thought it was getting fed. It had no idea. It figured it out quickly, but it just mistook my arm for a rodent. And so it lets go. I hold it for a second, put it back into the tub, wipe down my arm, clean it, soap and water, everything, put a towel on it. And I go up to the front, and all the guys from the tattoo shop come over. They're like, oh, my God, you got bit by the Boelen's python. Let me see it. And because I didn't like pull away or anything, it was very minimal damage. Like after like 10 minutes, you could barely tell that I even got bit. And you know, the guy, when he came to the front, he made it sound like I was getting murdered. He's like, "Oh my God, there's a giant snake! It's wrapped all around him." And I'm like, "Nah, man, it's fine." And there's no scars there on my arm or anything. There's no tissue damage or anything like that. You know, after the little scabs peeled, you couldn't even tell that I got bit there. And so that was like my quote unquote worst bite. The only other thing that I've had that was like, yeah, like I had 2 other bites that were like kind of weird. We had 2 monitors that we paired up, and they were super chill for the first like hour, and then all of a sudden I hear boom, 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 and I'm like, oh crap. Because sometimes, you know, one monitor will get more pushy when they're breeding, and if the other one's not receptive, they'll go after each other. And so I go into the room, I run in there, I open up the door, and the female monitor has got the male in her mouth. And so I'm like, oh crap. So I got to reach in there, and I'm trying to separate them out. And she's like really not letting go. So I grab her by the tail, and then I try and go and grab her by the head. As I go to grab her by the head, she lets go. And so I still got her by the tail. But when you're holding big monitors like that, if you need to separate them, you really need to hold them right by the tip of the tail. If you hold a big monitor by the end of the tail, the weight of their body keeps them from really swinging up and being able to grab you. But I had her like halfway down the tail because I was nincompoop and being stupid and not paying attention. And so she swung right up and grabbed the inside of my finger right here. And it wasn't even like a full grab. She just kind of like did one of those, and it cut my finger open pretty good right there. And the guys that I work with were like, "Holy shit, Rob got bit. Oh my God, Rob got bit." And, you know, I'm sitting there cleaning it off. And for monitor bites, we always soak them in a bleach solution and soap solution to make sure that it cleans out any bacteria that's in there, because monitors got really nasty mouths. And so I'm sitting there in the sink, you know, washing it off and everything. And it was just more an inconvenience than anything. So I had to move that monitor out and move her to a different enclosure. We had just like, you know, they just happened to not get along that time, and you know, it happens sometimes.
Right. Now, since we're talking about Nerd, man, you got to tell me, how fun is it working with Kevin, man?
Honestly, it's a little stressful. Kevin is like, he operates on this different level than anybody else. You know, when you ever hung out with someone who like knows way more about reptiles than you, and you're just like, damn, like this person, like they're on a different level. That's what it's like working with Kevin, because he's done so much and worked with so many different species and bred so many different things. And, you know, I'm a reptile guy. When people go to like zoos and they want to look at like anything else, I'm not really interested. Like, I'll go and like look at other stuff, but I like mammals are not my thing. Birds, not really my thing. Reptiles, it's me, eat, sleep, breathe reptiles for me. And so he's like just an animal person. He's got chickens, he's got goats, he's got, you know, alligators, king cobras, you name it, and he's worked with it. So like, I'll be like confused about something that's going on with one of these lizards, and he's like, oh no, it's like you got to treat it like it's this bird, and they got this certain thing that you treat this because I worked with these kinds of bird that I raised up and I learned blah blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, I never would have known that, because I just you know, birds are not really my circle. I learned how to feed baby birds when I worked here, or you know, since I've been working here. But before that, man, I have no real interest in most other animals besides reptiles. It's just like I'm hyper focused on reptiles. And when it comes to reptiles, like me and him can have a real, you know, decent conversation, and he's like, I love going into all these different scientific names and these rare species. And so me and him kind of vibe on that, because he's been around so long. He's seen all these different species and talked about, you know, people who keep this and this, you know, record of this species out in the wild. And so me and him kind of vibe on that. But, you know, he just operates on a different level than everybody else. And he's, you know, so experienced with a lot of this stuff that it's a little stressful. You know, sometimes you're just like, man, I don't know if I can ever do as much as this guy does, because he just does so much, you know?
Right. Now, I don't know how, you've probably been there for almost 10, 15 plus years. And I asked that to lead into this question of saying, you're soaking up knowledge from one of the biggest in the game. Have you ever thought about opening your own shop?
Yeah, not really. I've worked now, this is my second like larger reptile facility that I've worked at. I mean, the place that I worked at and managed in Maine was smaller, but it was, you know, doing a reptile store. I personally, I don't really like the retail side of things. It's definitely necessary. I understand the role that it plays. I think that it should stay and do its thing. But I really like doing education personally. If I was going to do anything related to reptiles, the only thing that I would do if I was to do like my own business is I would breed feeders, because the only people who really make money at a reptile show are the feeder people, the people who are selling mice, rats, and dubia roaches. I mean, maybe crickets too, but mostly mice, rats, and dubia roaches, because everyone who buys a reptile, even if you don't buy a reptile at the expo, you still got to buy feeders for the rest of your reptiles at home. Those are the people who really make money. And then educational programs, just because I'm like selfishly, I enjoy doing educational programs and I love teaching people about reptiles. That's like one of my favorite things. I've been doing that since I was like 10 years old. It's something special to me when you can get someone who is afraid of reptiles and then kind of change their mind. And working at Nerd, I've definitely been able to do that on a much larger scale than I had been able to do before. When I was younger, my mother and I had an educational business where we did birthday parties and school programs and summer camps and all this stuff. And, we did a lot of programs. We probably did, a couple thousand programs in the years that we were open. But, Nerd, we get a huge variety, like way more reach than we do, if I was to just do it on my own. So, I mean, the educational programs, you can definitely make a living doing it. It's a little bit more stressful on the animals and then on you. And, sometimes you have tough days where it's like, you just aren't feeling it, but you do it anyway. But if I was going to do my own, reptile business, it would probably be based around feeders and educational programs, because, when you have to rely on making that sale of that snake to pay your electrical bill or pay for your next meal or whatever, it brings down your standards, in my opinion, of who you'll sell to. Like when I sell my baby snakes, I usually ask people a whole slew of questions, my personal snakes. So I produced some Borneos last year, and the people that I, sold snakes to, I was like, hey, are you a member of US ARC? I need to know, like right off the bat. Are you someone who's kept short tails before? Do you know what you're doing? Are you going to hybridize this snake? Do you have any plans of hybridizing them? Because I don't want to be involved in that. I don't want any hand in that. And I can be a little bit more picky when it's not my my next, paying my car bill or paying for my next meal or paying my electrical bill or my rent or whatever. I can be more picky and say, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling selling it to you. And it's not going to be the end of the world if I don't sell it to this person. Whereas if it's keeping your lights on, you got to sell things. You have to keep selling things in order to make sure that your lights stay on, that you have a roof over your head. And it's lost its appeal to me.
Right. Now, yeah, you have met some. No, I don't want to do that question yet. I want to do a different question.
Okay.
Have y'all ever had a competition? And I'm gonna tell you what I mean. Nerd is, a big breeder and y'all sell stuff. Brian Barczyk is a big breeder and y'all sell stuff. Do you ever hit up Brian Barczyk and be like, look, we gonna sell 80 snakes this month, and if you sell 90, you beat us and we'll buy you a fat steak dinner? Or if we sell 3 more snakes than you got to buy everybody here steak. Y'all don't have no friendly competitions?
No, not really. Kevin is so far removed from social media. Like, he'll talk to Brian every now and again, and he's got like 1 or 2 people that he talks to on a regular basis. But Kevin is off in his own land doing his own thing. He does not really mess with anybody else online. Even like the people that we've done like YouTube collabs with, we've done collabs with Clint from Clint's Reptiles. We've done collabs with Will Nace and, some other people like that. It's been very just like we do our thing and then, we go our ways and do our own thing. And we still love those guys and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But we never make it a competition, honestly. Our competition is last year's numbers, and we're just trying to beat last year's numbers.
That makes sense. That definitely makes sense. Now, being as big as y'all are, do you get recognized when you go out? Like they're like, hey, that's Rob from Nerd.
Just out and about, no. When I go to reptile expos, yeah, people will be like, hey, oh my God, it's Rob from Nerd. but I kind of expect that at the Reptile Expos. People, it's weird because back 10, 12 years ago, when Brian from BHB and Snake Bites, when he was just kind of started out doing the YouTube videos, I used to make YouTube videos too, and there wasn't really many people doing videos about blood pythons and short-tailed pythons. There's like not a lot of people doing them now. I mean, just besides like Dan Magano's really pumping out the blood and short-tail videos. There's maybe like one or two other people that are doing videos on like mostly on bloods and short-tails. But back then, there was like nobody that did any videos on bloods and short tails. So when I would go to reptile expos, people would be like, "Oh my God, it's Rob! You did the blood python video! Like I love that. It really helped me take care of my blood python better or handle it safer or whatever." And so it was weird back then because like I was just making videos in my parents' house. I was just doing whatever. And then now people are like, "Oh my God, it's Rob from New England Reptiles, Rob from YouTube," and it's really something else because a lot of people who have been following Nerd for a long time, they might feel some type of way about our newer videos, as Donnie, our YouTube guy, has been doing our editing and doing our posting and really getting our videos spread to more people. Some of it is people say it's sensationalized, or there's some clickbait and blah 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 and all this stuff, and some of the people who have been around a long time are not a big fan of it. And one of the things that's really humbling for me is even the people who don't really like any of those videos, they'll come up to me and they'll say, "Hey, you know what? I don't really like the clickbait stuff, but whenever I watch a video with you in it, I always learn something new, and I appreciate that. You try not to overhype things or over sensationalize it. You just kind of are straight to the facts. You still make it entertaining, but you don't have to do the over the top. Whoa, yeah, oh my God, I got bit, blah blah blah, all this stuff to make it interesting still to learn because." That's been my goal since I was really little is to teach people and make it entertaining and to draw people in without any of the frills and all that sort of other stuff. So just doing educational programs for 10, 20, how many years? It's been almost 20 years that I've been doing educational programs. You kind of learn the things you can do to really teach people without scaring them. And that's
Right.
kind of been my mantra.
Right. I like that. Now, who is someone that you haven't met but you do want to meet in the hobby?
I've met Tracy Barker, which was like, boom, that's crazy. The Halmahera scrub python, Similia Tracy named after her. Super cool. That was like really awesome. I met her in Daytona, and I think it was 2009, I think. That was super cool. I would love to meet Dave, who is her husband. That would be amazing. I've not got a chance to meet him. He sometimes goes to the Arlington shows down in Texas. I would love to meet him. Dan Malari, he just moved over to overseas, but I plan on doing some field herping over there, so I would love to meet Dan. He's like the real deal. I feel like me and him would have some cool conversations. It would be really humbling. I've talked to him here and there.
Talking about DM Exotics?
Yeah, DM Exotics, Dan Malari. I saw you had him on, right?
Last night, like 2 nights ago.
Yeah, I would love to meet him. He is like, man, when I think about people who I like kind of look up to now, I've met a lot of the people who I kind of looked up to, and he's one where I would love to meet him. That would be super cool. I've heard that Mark O'Shea goes to the expos overseas and stuff, so it would be super cool to meet him. And then, the Irwins over in Australia, it would mean nothing to them, but I think it would be pretty cool to meet Steve Irwin's family. Because I kind of grew up just like following them, and their passion for education and conservation was just like something that really got me going when I was a kid. And then I'm trying to think. I've met a lot of the people that I kind of look up to. I had one other person in mind too. I just totally spaced out their name. Oh my goodness. I think Dave and Tracy Barker, DM Exotics, Dan Malari. Oh man, I'm totally spacing. I had one other person in mind, but I can't think of who it is right now.
What you need to do, man, you and Jeremy need to DM Exotics and get them on y'all podcast.
I would love to do that, man. I feel like I would just geek out and be like, oh my God, you're over there, you get to see all this cool stuff. Oh my God, I'll lose my shit.
Right.
He's the real deal, man.
Now this section of the interview I do with everybody. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I call this section the hot seat. Now, you got to think about these questions. So we're gonna start. If you weren't working at Nerd and you got to choose one of these, where would you be? Would you rather be at Gatorland with Savannah? I've had her on my channel. Would you rather be at the Reptarium with Brian? Would you rather be at Underground Reptiles, or would you rather be at Will Nace's zoo that he's building? You got to pick one, brother.
So So here's the deal. I'll go through it and explain why. Because I would like to work with a Will Nace, but Florida's banned scrub pythons. I can't keep my scrub pythons in Florida, so Florida's off the table for me. That's kind of the same thing with Savannah at Gatorland. I would love to work at Gatorland. They do so much education. I would be over the moon excited with that. And then I think Ryan's in Florida too, so that just like nixes all those guys off. I would really like to work with Brian at the Reptarium. Honestly, I've known Brian for like 15 years. Like I said, when I was making YouTube videos way back in the day, you know, there wasn't a lot of people making reptile content back then. So I got pretty friendly with Brian, and he used to come to the White Plains Reptile Expo in New York, which was like maybe 4 hours from where I grew up. So I used to like go to that expo every single time. Every other month it would happen, I'd be there. And Brian would have a big end cap, and you know, sometimes he would have employees with him. Sometimes he wasn't able to bring a lot of people. So after I did my once around the expo, I would ask him, hey, do you need any help? And so I used to help him vend his table every now and again, you know, not every single show, but, you know, periodically if he needed help. I knew that his animals were, you know, top notch. I knew about the care of all the animals and all that sort of stuff. I didn't know the exact lineage on his stuff, but if I had a question about that, I could always ask him. Most people just ask like general care questions, and then they wanted to buy things so I could pull them out of this displays and show them and everything. So I used to work with Brian a little bit at the White Plains show and help him vend his table there. And then, you know, Brian's got this huge audience for education, and that's what I'm all about is really teaching people. And I love that aspect of things. So it would have to be Brian over at the Reptarium, because education is really where my heart lies.
Okay, that's a good answer. I like that answer. Now, it used to be when you were thinking about the reptile hobby, the face of the hobby was, and I could say still is, but it was Steve Irwin. Now, in this day, when you're thinking about the reptile hobby, who would you put as the face of our hobby?
Right now, it's Brian Barczyk. Like it or not, like some people hate on him, and that's whatever. Like if you don't like Brian Barczyk, that's on you, whatever. I don't care. Because there's nothing I'm going to say that's probably going to change your mind. But most of the people who hate Brian don't know Brian. If you've ever met Brian or been to his place or learned from him, you probably have a different opinion than, you know, the random person who's like, I saw a YouTube video and it said Brian Barczyk's the devil. And, you know, he's got this huge audience and this huge platform that he can use to teach people about reptiles. And no matter what you're doing at your house, you're not changing more minds than Brian is. It's plain and simple. If you don't like Brian's YouTube videos, start making YouTube videos. If you want to do better education than him, start doing better education than him. Try to do something, because 99% of the people who talk shit about Brian are not doing anything. They're sitting at their home in their reptile room, you know, with whatever reptiles they got, not changing the world's mind. And we don't need more people like that. We need more people who are on the front line, changing people's minds, getting people to touch reptiles, getting people to fall in love with reptiles. Because if you are in love with your reptiles in your house, that's cool. But the people who are regulating against reptiles right now, they don't have any experience with reptiles. They're not going to your reptile room. They are not going to an educational program. So the more that we put ourselves out there, and it's risky, you know, people are going to hate you if you put yourself out there regardless. People hate on Nerd. People hate on Brian. People hate on everyone who's got a platform, no matter who you are. There's somebody who hates you. I promise. There's people who probably hate me. I don't really care about them. They don't pay my bills, so I don't care. But for all those people who are like, well, you know, I don't like that he has snakes and racks. And it's like, okay, then what are you doing to give your snakes an all naturalistic room for your enclosures? Please show me. Until you can walk the walk, shut up. Like that's what it boils down to. And, you know, like it or not, Brian is the face of the hobby right now. He's got over 3 million followers on YouTube. He's pulling in the numbers of people. You know, there's people who follow him every single day, and every single day there's new people who find him that I can't even tell you. So here's the deal. I'm going to stand up on the soapbox for just a minute here. I get a lot of people who are like, well, Brian Barczyk, he's not, you know, showing blah, 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 right, or whatever. And you know what? A lot of people, if they go back now through their same lens that they're looking at Brian at, and they go look at Steve Irwin, they would probably dislike Steve Irwin. And because he's such a part of the hobby growing up for most people, they're not going to hate on Steve Irwin. But he free-handled venomous snakes. He was, you know, hopping in on crocodiles, not doing things always the safest way. He would, you know, put snakes in people's hands and all this stuff. And if he was out now, people would probably be hating on him so hard, so hard. But he changed millions and millions of people's minds about reptiles. And same thing with Brian. You know, people look at Brian like, oh, people are only learning from Brian and that's it. And it's like, no, are you dumb? Like, we're on the internet. When you go and click on one of Brian's videos, you know whose videos come up next? Snake Discovery and Clint's Reptiles and New England Reptile and Tyler Nolan and all these other people. It's not a closed system. We're not just reading one book over and over and over and over again. You know, if someone gets their first love through one person and then they branch out and learn more things, who cares? Who cares? Yeah, they're in. They're in. They got in the door. That's the most important thing, is to get them in the door. I can't even tell you how many kids come to our shop and they go, oh my God, I love Emily from Snake Discovery. I watch all her videos. I learned so much about gopher snakes and garter snakes and alligators from her. And then I watched Brian Barczyk's videos and I love his vlogs and Perdita and Ivy, his green anaconda, and, you know, his Boland's python and blah, blah, blah. And these kids, they're not going, oh, I only watch Brian Barczyk videos. I don't look at anything else. They go, he got me interested in reptiles. And then I learned all these other things. And the people who are hating on Brian, they treat it like, oh, you watch Brian Barczyk videos, you don't know anything else about reptiles. And that's not the world that we live in. This is not 20 years ago where you had one show that you could watch about reptiles, maybe two. You could go to your local library and you can read one book or two books that they might have and maybe ask the next local library if they have a reptile book. This is the age of information. People can get audio and video and information from all over the world. It's not just one person. It's not one person anymore. So, you know, for those people, you know, if they can't see past that lens, there's probably not anything I'm going to say that'll change their mind. But what it boils down to is, if Brian gets people in the door, if he's the face of the hobby, that means there's more people who love reptiles to come to Nerd. There's more people who love reptiles to go to the Reptile Expo. There's more people who come into the hobby who want to buy the snakes that you're breeding, or maybe see the stuff that you're working with, or to learn things from you. Or if you're a feeder guy or a caging guy or girl, you know, people to buy your enclosures or to get feeders from you. It's not a closed system. People look at it like it's 30 or 40 years ago, where it's like this weird niche thing and there's only one guy that you watch on TV and there's only, you know, you only learn so much. It's not like that anymore. There's so much information out there. There's so many people that are doing good things with the hobby. And if people use Brian as a stepping stone to get further into the reptile hobby, I'm down with that. I'm cool, man. That's what it's about. And, you know, I think that as we go, seeing people that look like you in the hobby is something that's super important. And I want to throw this out there. I'm half black. My dad is from the Caribbean. And it's cool for me to see people who kind of look like me or a little bit darker skin, or Miguel from Always Evolving Pythons. You know, he's Latin. You know, seeing people who are not just white dudes who are all tattooed and everything in the hobby, I think it's so cool, because I see, you know, younger kids, like younger brown kids and black kids who are coming into the shop and learning things. And they go, when they see people like you and me in the hobby, they go, oh my God, man, I didn't see anyone like me. And for me, that's like so humbling, because, you know, when I was growing up, it was all just a bunch of white dudes doing this stuff. And now I'm seeing more people of color in it. And it's like, you know, being able to look up and see someone like you who's doing the things that you want to do is huge for kids today. And, you know, we're not in this closed system anymore. There's people who are learning. There's people watching your podcast or watching your live streams. There's people who are learning from my podcast and my live streams. There's people who learn from Brian and from Kevin and, you know, Tracy Barker and like all these people, you know, Savannah at Gatorland, Dan from DM Exotics. You know, it's not a closed system anymore. The more people that we get into this hobby, the better it is for everybody. And that's basically what it boils down to, you know?
Right. Now you already addressed the haters, and I love that. You just pretty much you ain't doing nothing to help change anything. Be quiet. I love that answer.
Yeah.
Now we're almost done. I got a couple more questions for you. I
Yeah.
think you're a legend. I think you're a legend, and you know you're excellent at what you do. But what's the hardest? Hold on, because I got to switch spots in the building. I don't want to lose signal again. Hold on, okay?
Yeah. No problem. Yeah. This is a mandatory dance break. So if you are watching right now, you got to dance it out. Mm, 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 mm. I don't know any TikTok dances, so I'm sorry. I'm getting ripped
Give
tonight.
me 1 second. I'm just switching spots in the building. Don't go anywhere. I'm just switching spots.
No,
I'm
you're
getting on
good,
the
man.
elevator.
This is a mandatory dance break. If this is still streaming right now, thank you everybody for who's tuning in and watching this. I appreciate you. Make sure that you share this with somebody. It's hot in here. That's right. Smash that like button. Boom. Open the door real quick. Babla.
Okay. Oh, gorgeous. What is that? Let me see.
Yeah, this is a ocelot jungle jaguar carpet python that I hatched out when I was working in Maine.
Gorgeous.
Oh yeah, she's killer.
How much does something like that run?
Usually I think these are like $1,000 or something like that.
Gorgeous snake. Let us see something else. You blessing us, man.
Let's see. I'm gonna have to run to the other room if I want to take anything else out. Hold on
Okay,
one second.
let us see one more thing. That's gorgeous.
One more thing. One more thing.
You blessing us, man. Man, this is an amazing live stream. We are hanging out with Rob. It's Creeping It Real from Nerd. Amazing guy. I appreciate everybody in the chat. Thank you for watching. Smack that like button. Make sure you go subscribe to Rob. It's Keeping It Real. Subscribe to Derek's Reptiles, man. I appreciate y'all for watching, man. Oh, I seen the dance break. I seen it. Derek, you missed Rob's dance break. KY Constrictor said, great lives. Man, that's what it's about, man. Just hanging out with some of the dopest people in the hobby and just learning, man, and having fun.
So this is a Borneo that I hatched out last year. This is like probably my favorite one that I hatched out. Let me see if I can, hold on. Let me see if I can
Gorgeous.
get the camera out here and get, here we go.
Gorgeous.
Oh yeah. She's awesome.
Beautiful snake, man. I'm jealous, man. Now, I don't know if you can answer this while we got you on. What do you think this is the hot seat? What do you think the hardest part about working at Nerd is for you? What's been the hardest part?
The hardest part about working at Nerd has been probably the sales stuff, honestly. Just trying to maximize sales and make sure that we're, hitting our bottom line, making sure that we're staying on top of all the different projects that we're working on. It's been tough to do that. There's so many different moving parts to Nerd that it's easy to miss something here or something there, and it's compounded when you have got a place this big. So it's tough, the sales aspect of it.
Eric B said the hardest part is not spending that paycheck on all them great animals.
So the one blessing that I've got here is I am super picky about reptiles, and most of the stuff that I'm interested in, Kevin doesn't have. So I don't have to worry about really buying stuff from Nerd. Every now and again, I actually did just buy one snake from Nerd, but most of the stuff that he gets in is not stuff that I'm interested in. So I'm cool with just selling it, getting it out the door.
Now this is the last hot seat question, and then I'm gonna do my shout outs.
Yep.
You got to tell me, what's the employee discount at Nerd, man?
25%. That's it.
You know what? That's actually not bad.
Yeah, I mean, certain things you can work off. If it's like not something super rare, you can put in extra hours and work off some stuff. So we've had employees do that sort of thing, but usually it's 25%.
Man, I'll be working 7,000 hours getting everything. I'll be like, Kev, go ahead, sign me up for 20 hours every day. Now, I got to get back to work. So first off, I want to say, Rob, I appreciate you for hanging out with me, man. You're a legend in the game. You're doing some amazing stuff at Nerd, man. We are going to end the live, but before I end my live, I always give out shout outs, man, because we have a great community of people that I rock with. So first off, you guys, everybody's in the chat watching. Shout out to Iron Dog, My Animal House, Reese's Pythons, Ball Python Love, Fitz Family Constrictors, Venom Wonderful, Desert Wolf, Hoseways Exotics, Kurtwood, Cold-Blooded Monstars, OSMR, Reptile Feedings, J&G, Hilljack, KY Constrictors. It's so many dope people in my community, man. So if y'all watching, go check them out. Great group of people. Don't go anywhere, Rob. I'm getting ready to end this, man. This is big reptile talk, man. We hanging out with some of the dopest people in the hobby. Y'all stay tuned. You don't know who I'm bringing next, man. We out of here. Peace.
Boom.